Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Amy Suto, author of The Nomad Detective. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me, Terry. I'm really excited to be here.
I am super excited to have you. Loved the book, but before we really get into it, why don't you let readers know what they're going to find when they open up the cover?
Yeah, so the Nomad Detective was inspired by my journey as a digital nomad. I have been traveling the world for the past 5 years. And in my travels, I often ran into situations where I heard these crazy stories about the true crime. And I traveled with large groups of digital nomads, met a ton of friends on the road. And one thing that you recognize with digital nomads, there's not only just people trying to run towards something and find themselves or a piece of something in the world. There's also people running from things. And in some cases, that is crime. And so I think that when I was traveling, the thing that was really fascinating is I was learning a lot about local legends. I was learning a lot about the things that, people get into that are, less than savory beyond the tourist traps. And so my writer mind just started thinking, what if I put together a short story collection inspired by all of my different travels to these different places, taking some true crime stories or, elaborating on some the things that were going on. So inside the Nomad Detective are short stories that are inspired by my travels, and they follow Violet Chase. She is a private eye that is on a mission to find her missing sister, and she will take any case that gets her a little bit closer to the answers that she needs to find her missing sister. And she has something, there's a little bit of a secret sauce. She has synesthesia, which means that she can see auras and different senses present as different things. And she uses this information to help kind of, hone her detective skills and see if somebody's lying to her and kind of get a sense of like when the vibe is off. And we all have kind of like that extra like intuition. Like we always kind of have that gut feeling when we run into somebody at a party or in a foreign country, and we're like, there's something off here. And so Violet's kind of synesthesia takes that a little step further, and brings together a little bit of her kind of street smarts and this little extra ability as she navigates the world and all of these like different, darkness that she finds while she's on a journey to find her missing sister, and also kind of like falling in and out of romances with some of the men she meets around the world.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in what you just said, and it touched on so many of the questions that I had beforehand. So let's start with, why did you decide to go with a short story collection? So many authors that write in the mystery genre, they'll write a series of novels, and maybe they're short novels, maybe in the 60 to 70,000 word as opposed to 120, but that's what they do. And yours instead was this collection of short stories, which I was not expecting when I picked it up. I loved the format, but what made you decide on that versus a more traditional novel approach?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the benefits of being, independently published, self-published.
Yes,
is that
absolutely.
I know that if I'd gone traditionally published, they would have been like, you have to start your series with one mystery, one book, and that's it.
Right.
That, like, as a digital nomad, I really love the juxtaposition of one location on the other. So in here, it's like the difference between Paris and Peru. And I think that there's so much vibrancy, not only within these locations, but also against each other and like next to each other. And so I wanted to give the reader a sampling of what this detective's life was like as a whole, not just one location, but also like, what is it like, what is kind of like pulling at her psyche across these destinations as she's running around the world. And I love kind of like throwing in inside jokes of the cases between the cases of like, well, what happened in Argentina? We have no idea.
So we have no idea, but we want to know.
Yeah, and so I love kind of like trying to figure out, like, because my life was for the last 5 years before I finally decided to settle down recently in San Francisco. My life was month to month of moving from Japan, to Taiwan, to Singapore. And so for me, like, because my life was go, I did feel like sometimes going a little crazy of like, oh, I'm in a new place. Like, how do I get oriented to here? And so I wanted to capture a little bit of that true digital nomad experience in the short story collection to kick off the series. Yes. And while the next book might not be a short story collection, I thought it was really important for book one to start that way so that we could watch her arc and understand not only her lifestyle and her problems and establish the different people in her life, but also understand the foundations of who this character is and the people that she's dealing with in a global stage rather just than one location.
I loved it. I found it to be very fascinating. Like I said, I was surprised. Apparently, I didn't read the back well or something because I didn't know what I was getting into. But it was great. It was kind of like, oh, wait, that one wrapped up, and oh, there's more. And so I loved that. I loved that feeling. I like a good short story. It was long enough that I was very involved. I got involved with the characters, and then it kind of wrapped up, but it didn't because we were immediately then into where she went next. And I love this idea that she's kind of traipsing around with these digital nomads, and then she herself is being a nomad detective. And
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And you, by the way, are the first digital nomad that I've actually met.
Oh,
So I
amazing.
think this is really cool. You know, our lives are very different. I'm 61. Digital nomads were not a thing. Then I had children, and that was definitely not a thing. So that never happened for me. But I like that idea of being able to just say, well, I don't have to be here.
Right.
I can go other places, and then to take a detective and have them do that as well. I just think that is really cool. Let's also talk a little bit about her unusual ability. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Synesthesia?
Synesthesia, yeah.
I got it right. Okay. Let's talk about that. Like, what is it? And where in the world did you come up with that as her big skill? Because in most detective stories, you've got your person who's got something. They have something that makes them stand out. And this is her something that makes her stand out. Where did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, I think that I spent a lot of time in different communities. Like I was just in Tuscany and like went to see an energy healer who said some very accurate things about my life and then banished a ghost from my house. And so I've loved kind of being in these spaces. And I was also a yoga teacher back when I was in LA and took my yoga teacher training and experiencing like these kind of spaces with especially other women that have or claim to have this like extrasensory ability. At first, it's easy to be like, yeah, sure you do. But at the same time, like I've had some interesting experiences with some of these people who have these like extra skills and that kind of intuition beyond the everyday. And it's hard to like completely discredit it when they're saying something that is really specific and really accurate. And so I think that was kind of partially what informed it. And I'd known synesthesia as this, you know, this thing that afflicts people, sometimes for the better, sometimes for worse, where, you know, some people say the color red feels like sandpaper, or, you know, they see things and hear things in ways that their senses are kind of mixed up, like the wires are crossed. And as part of that, occasionally some people with synesthesia also say that they see auras and they can kind of look at somebody and see the color around them and see like how it ebbs and flows in their emotions and can kind of tell what their intentions are. And I think that like as individuals, we can read micro expressions. There's so much research about how, you know, you can tell your brain is registering micro emotions that maybe you don't even recognize until you're just like, that vibe was weird, or I think that person's lying, but I can't say why. And so I think that like I wanted to not just say, you know, this detective is very street smart and good at reading people. I wanted to give her a little bit of that boost and to kind of bring almost like a late fantasy element into this story, even though it's not truly fantasy, because it's like some people do have this ability and some people do use it to read people. And I remember, you know, walking down, I was back when I was in college at USC. I remember walking through the dining hall. I was like really excited for like a night out with friends. And somebody just came up to me and he put his hand on his shoulder and he had these like big, long, like flowing hair. And he's like, your energy is really nice tonight. And then he just walked off. And so I've had just like some interesting, like interactions with people who are like focused on energy. And I think that while I am a little bit more of a skeptic than a lot of people, I don't claim to know all the secrets of the universe. And so I think that that's something really interesting for a detective to have, because you can't just reconcile, I felt this way about this person, therefore they are guilty and they committed this crime. You have to then reconcile, I feel this way. Now I have to go find the hard evidence to prove what I feel. So it's kind of like a new take on like the Sherlock Holmes kind of approach, but with kind of women's intuition and a little bit of that extrasensory perception.
And I loved it. And you know, you said for better or worse, that it can be good or it can be bad. And for her, it's both, because there are times where certain sounds, she tastes things, right? And she doesn't like the way it tastes, you know, and it's kind of like, so it's interesting how that all kind of wraps together. And not to give anything away, but there's one in one of the short stories where she can't decide what their aura is. She keeps saying there's something weird here because what I'm seeing is nothing. And I've never seen nothing before. Right. And so what does that mean? And so she has to go through all of that. So I found that really, really very fascinating. So like all good characters, Violet is not perfect, right? She's got her flaws and she's got her idiosyncrasies. And we also learn that she has been in an abusive relationship. And I was in an abusive relationship for 14 years. So I immediately connected with Violet because it was like, ooh, I understand this, like this fear and this sense of like foreboding, even when his name comes up. Where did that come from? Is that something that you've experienced? Is that something that you just felt that she needed to have this backdrop? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I've never personally been in an abusive romantic relationship, but I've been in situations where I've been around people. I've been in some toxic situations beyond the romantic situation.
Right.
And in those situations, the dread that I felt of entering a space with that person and having to inhabit the same space as that person was soul crushing. And it was completely just like made me feel isolated and alone. When I tried to talk to other people about that situation, it felt like they just thought that I was blowing it out of proportion. And so I think that like that gaslighting that happens so much with women in a lot of different settings, not just the romantic setting, but also out in the world when we're in workplaces and other places, it can feel like someone's taking away your power. And I thought that this was an important thing to have with Violet, because when you're a woman traveling as a digital nomad, there's also a lot of danger around you and a lot of people who want to prey upon you. And I think that while I was grateful that I was able to travel with my partner, Kyle, and like to have like a community around me, I did see a lot of women who were making their way through the world solo and really encountering some of the darker side of other nomads as well as the environments that they were in. And so I think that for me, the abusive relationship of Violet's past kind of represents the evil that follows around women across different parts of our lives, and the oppressiveness and the heaviness and the shame that comes with it too. Because for her, it's like it's hard for her to even kind of share this with other people and to explain what it is, because it feels like the shame and the weight of it is just so heavy. And so
it's hard for her, I think, to reconcile that here she is, you know, smart, intelligent, capable, out there solving crimes, and had been in this awful relationship.
Yeah. And I think
it's like the two parts don't seem to go together. And how do you fix that?
Definitely. And I think that there's something about like when we're trained to be like, we are smart women, we can handle our own, everything that comes our way. And then the moment that we can't because something is so heavy that it's so hard to ask for help. And I wanted to characterize that in a character who, you know, seemed to be able to read people, seemed to be able to have everything together, yet she still has this weakness. And it shows that, you know, we can all fall into this trap of being preyed upon by people who want to take something from us. And I think that that's something that I really wanted to show in these stories.
Well, and you did a really good job. Like I said, I immediately felt for her, and I immediately understood that feeling that she was having. You don't understand. You know, I'm trying to explain something to you and you don't understand how bad this is going to be, and people were blowing her off. And then once again, like I said, that idea that here she is, she can read everybody. How did she get fooled? And she can't really forgive herself. Right. And as someone who I always feel that I'm good at judging people, and yet somehow I ended up in this relationship, and I still wonder, like, how did that happen?
Right.
And then and it's trying to reconcile that. And it's really hard because on the one hand, I say, I read people well, except the time I didn't.
Yeah. And we all have our kryptonite. And I think that a good complex, like female character should represent the fact that, you know, we all have something that can hurt us. And I think that every superhero has to have that sense of kryptonite. And that's something that I feel like we often don't see enough of in detective characters. And I wanted to add that nuance with especially a female detective, because I think that, you know, we shouldn't just be reading about these invincible characters that, you know, can't be taken down by anything or can't ever be fooled. Like the one thing about Sherlock Holmes is like you want like there's so much brilliance there. It's like you kind of like you want to see through the facade. And so I think that for me, like I think having somebody who feels more human than superhuman is important to me and my characters.
Well, and I think that is one of the things I know when I wrote my very first manuscript, my character was too perfect. I had just gotten out of my abusive relationship. I think my character needed to be perfect because I needed to feel perfect. But when I went back and read it, it was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Like everything that you throw at her, she just, comes out, like Superwoman. And I learned from that experience that characters need to represent the people who are going to read them. Right? Like I want my women to be strong and weak.
Yeah.
Strong and have the ability to cry and be hurt. Strong and capable and also who need help. Because isn't that true?
Right. Yeah.
And that's what you want. And that's so your character was really well-rounded. That's a hard word to say fast.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we've got 4 short stories. Do you have one that is more of a favorite?
It's tough. I love them all for different reasons, but I think that the one that I love the most is Dead Woman's Pass. And this is also something a lot of readers talk to me about. And when I did the 26-mile Inca trail on the way to Machu Picchu in Peru, it was such a life-altering experience. And it was something that I wasn't even sure I would have been able to do because a few years prior, I'd been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, rheumatoid arthritis, that I ended up, I was falling downstairs. I was having a really hard time. I was on these crazy medications and I ended up putting it in remission. And then being able to do this 26-mile hike through unforgiving wilderness felt like such a victory lap because it was hundreds of stairs. I went from falling downstairs to like scaling hundreds of them. And so during that transformational experience, there were so many cool things that I learned about Peruvian culture and all of the myths and legends. And so I wanted to tell a short story that kind of felt like you were in a murder mystery, but you were also in a murder mystery in Peru and kind of seeped with pieces of that culture and that kind of like misty mountain elements and vibe that just like completely transport you from reality. Because when you're doing that hike, you have left reality. You are on your own. Like, there's no cell phone service for the entire 4 days. Like you are completely isolated. And I think that is something that makes a great place for something to go wrong. And that's what I kept thinking about in the back of my head. I'm like, oh no, what is going to go wrong?
Yeah. I'm sure as an author who has these ideas for murder mysteries, I'm sure that you were probably trying to stay very much in the center of the path the whole time. No way are you getting near an edge, right?
Yeah. And it's crazy when you're going through like the foggy kind of like forest section of the hike. You're just like surrounded by fog and you're like, I hope I don't walk up a cliff. Yes, and so it's such a very like a unique experience. And I wanted to capture that for people who maybe don't get to go on that hike, but also bring together like, what is it like to also kind of like, who do you trust? And like who on this path? Because it's like, I went with a group of friends and acquaintances, some people I just met. And it's really interesting to see people kind of like go through this hike and unravel a bit and thinking about like, oh, what would it take for somebody to like really unravel? What would it take for somebody in the wilderness to like really get ready to like take something a step further? And so I think that my murder mystery brain just kind of came up with that. And I've been watching a lot of like, and reading a lot of Agatha Christie and seeing the adaptations. And I love kind of this kind of closed container of like everybody, and then there were none, like kind of feel of this mystery. So I wanted to take that onto the Inca Trail and infuse it with a lot of my experiences there. So
that trip, by the way, I was going to ask you if it was something you had done. So I'm glad to know that you did. I love that idea of an adventure. My husband and I rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle.
Wow.
So we rode from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C. And the things that changed in me, so I had been in an abusive relationship. I was now in a good relationship, but there was still a lot of damage. And that trip changed me. It helped me find the person I had been back before the damage, like, oh, there she is. And there I am with all that I know now. So it was an amazing trip. So I'm glad that you had an experience like that. I think that everyone should have some big defining moment like that they can point to and say, I did that. I did that big thing, because that's just really cool. So have you done any other adventures like that? Like, now that you've done that, or are you in your mind thinking, oh, the next one I want to do is...
No, I think that it almost kind of cured my I want to be in the wilderness hiking. And I was like, oh, did that. I'm done. Now back to going to cities.
Yeah.
I'm not as much. I love nature. Like, that's why I picked to live in San Francisco after traveling the entire world. I was like, I like being in nature, I like being walkable, but I also like being in a city where I don't have to camp. And so I think that it was a great experience, and I recommend it to everybody. But I think that it kind of
cured, you don't need to do it twice.
I cured my outdoor adventure spirit.
People asking me that, like, would you ever do it again? It's like, no. No, I mean, I am so glad I did it. I would never want to trade that experience in. I learned so much about myself and life and people, and it was fabulous, and I don't need to do it twice.
Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, I understand that. I understand that feeling completely. Let's talk a little bit about your writing style. Are you a write every day? Are you a write with an outline? How does that look for you? Somehow, as a nomad kind of person, I'm wondering if you're very free form, or if in your writing you're more, I don't know, list oriented. Which is it?
Yeah, I have to have a deadline. And so every time that I'm starting a new book, I have to set the Amazon pre-order, and I have to be like, I'm working backwards from that now. Like, I can't move this. Like, if I've set the pre-order and it's public and everyone knows when it's coming out, like, I'm forced to hit this deadline. And so I think that for me, I have structure around my writing. So I have an outline style that I adhere to. I came up as a TV writer in Hollywood, and before moving into books. And I think that experience helped me structure. And so I do a lot of detailed outlining before I even get to draft. And so that helps a lot. But for me, I'm definitely more of like a sprint writer. Like, I will have a level of consistency because you have to, but I'll spend like 4 months writing like every single day, like, and then take 3 months off. And so I think it helps to have kind of the, like, I am focused. This is what I'm doing every single day. And then this is like my time that I'm going to go like do the other things in my world that have been neglected. So I think having that kind of like ebb and flow is better for me than just like every single day writing, because I also run a Substack for writers. I also do have a freelance writing career as a memoir ghostwriter. So I also have other things in my life that I shift focus between everything and kind of balance. And so because of that, I've learned how to like really set aside deep work time for different projects. And I think for fiction, we always have to make sure to, like, all writers that have multiple things going on in their life have to figure out how to prioritize fiction, because it can be really easy to be like, oh, I have emails to get to, I have a house to clean, I have like other things to do. We have to be like, no, like the worlds within us matter, and we have to be able to honor that and honor the characters that are coming from us. It can also inspire and help other people. And like, the world does need our stories. And so really taking that seriously as like something that needs and requires time is something that is like a constant struggle in my calendar, but an important struggle that I think all of us deal with in some way.
Yeah, I am not a daily writer. I tell people I do write daily, but it's often in my head. I'm trying things out and whatnot. I'm very much what I call a binge writer, where all of a sudden I'll think, and then I start writing, and I hope no one wants anything from me for the next 14 hours, because I'm now writing, and then when I'm done, it's like, okay, don't need to do that for a little while until I have that again. So I'm more of that writer, and it's really interesting to me because in my life, I'm a list maker. I like things to be neat and orderly. I like to know when I'm doing what. I keep a calendar. I'm very very straight and narrow. That's the way I live my life. I even do that on vacation. I'm the vacation person that everyone hates, because at 2:00 we're supposed to be here. Why are we not here yet? I'm that person. And yet my writing life is completely opposite. I'm a complete pantser. I don't make outlines. They ruin everything for me. I can't write that way. I write when it hits me, and it can hit me at any time. And it's so unusual to me to see how my life is one way and my writing life is like totally opposite.
No, but I love that. I think that it's so helpful to have that contrast, because sometimes the creative brain needs something different, and we kind of have to honor that in like the creation stage.
Yeah, I tell everybody my creative brain needs this big, wide open space to play. And if I provide that, then off we go. But if I've got it all cluttered up with other stuff, my creative brain just says, yeah, we're not going to get out on that. That's awful. Clean that stuff up and let us know when you're ready, you know. So maybe that's what it is my lists and everything in my day life make it so that I can clear out space so that my creativity can come out.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that idea of like clearing space. And I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to think about it, because you need that canvas to then paint upon.
Yeah. In fact, I've talked with other writers before about this idea of writer's block. And I don't like writer's block as a term. I feel like at least for me, what writer's block is that I have too many other things going on to allow the space and time that's necessary for the creativity. And so either I need to figure out what that is and put it in a box and say, okay, well, we're going to work on this tomorrow. Or I need to clear it up completely. Like maybe it's something that I need to sit down and work on and get that taken care of so that it's no longer the thing in my way.
Yeah.
You know, and then once that's gone, it's amazing to me how, as I clear up whatever's going on in this crazy brain of mine, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have something I want to write.
Yeah. No,
whereas the day before I couldn't have written anything if you'd made me. Like there's nothing there, but in the meantime I had cleared up whatever was on my mind.
Yeah, and I think that's why tools like morning pages, meditation, yoga, workout, like going on walks are such effective tools for writers, is because we have to clear the mental clutter as well as the physical clutter. And I think that is just so important to like keeping yourself able to show up on the page regularly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is next for you, Amy? When are we getting our next installment of Nomad Detective?
Yes, no release dates yet. I can't share too much about the next project that I'm working on, but I will announce it on my Substack or my blog at amysuto.com. For me, I released a romantasy book last Valentine's Day, and so that has been really fun to kick off that series as well. But the next Nomad Detective will be coming soon. It's just been difficult to pick the story to go for the next book, and I've been doing some travel recently to Copenhagen and Italy, and so I'm just like, oh, there's so many different stories to choose from and trying to figure out the flow. So I have some ideas and I have some outlines and sketches. So the next Nomad Detective will be coming soon, but I also have some other projects as well. But yeah, excited to announce the date for the next Nomad Detective very soon, I hope.
Super. So hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you'll have a chance to win a digital copy of the Nomad Detective. So Amy, if someone wants to get in touch with you, talk with you about your stories, talk with you about writing in general, how do they do that?
Yeah, so anybody can reach out to me on my website, amysuto.com, or on any social media platform at pseudoscience. So my last name, Suto, and then the word science. And then I also have a Substack at From the Desk of Amy Suto on Substack. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Terry.
Yeah. So I'll have all of that in the show notes, guys. Run right out, grab Nomad Detective. And Amy, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.